26th of March in 2024. And I give the year because it's been quite a while since our tonight's special guest host has been on with me. We keep missing each other, but Jeff is one of the co-founders of the Captive Audience on May 12th, 2020.
That's right.
We were the ones that were on. Well, first you and David, and then I jumped in, and then we just kept it going. And that's like 500 shows ago or something crazy. And
it's crazy that it's still going, and yet the name is still relevant, right?
That's right. The captivity continues, and there is an audience.
Day 500 of our occupation.
That's right.
Our hostages are being held in the state of Oregon.
That's right. The entire state is a giant, I mean, we have just about everybody else, but except maybe the Gaza Strip beaten for having, hostages.
Yeah.
So, and the thing is, our captors are determined to keep us, in captivity. But it's starting to fall apart for them. They just had, you probably remember what Measure 110, right? And this crazy law that was approved by voters deceptively, with a ballot title that said in small print, "Oh, by the way, decriminalizes blah 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 blah," meth, fentanyl, and all that stuff. And what do we get? Enormous amounts of people coming to do meth and fentanyl, and it's just destroyed like entire cities here.
Yeah, no, I still have a bunch of friends that do a lot of citizen journalism and street journalism, do a lot of stuff on X, Twitter, and have documented photojournalism of the destruction of Portland, and it's sickening and it's astonishing. I mean, I look at these current photos and I don't recognize neighborhoods that I frequented only 3 years ago.
Yeah.
The graffiti is out of control. The garbage is out of control. It's frightening what's happening in Portland. And what I fear is that it's just kind of become normalized to the citizens of Portland, and that they've just sort of gotten used to it.
Yeah. It's like, being in, bombed out Warsaw or something. It's like, oh, there's just another destroyed building over there. Oh, well, I've got to get on to my latte over at the place where the Antifa people all work during the day. And it's been, but it has been a sea change in the last year, because in 2022, Democrats are asking for more time and more money. And they got more time and they got more money, and it got more worse. And so now they were forced to begin to reverse some of the stuff they did. And the Soros people are just livid. They spent $1 million to try and keep the state legislature,
and lobbied their asses off, right? And
oh yeah, and they ran YouTube videos of people saying why Measure 110 was such a blessing. These ads that run before or after or in the middle of YouTube videos, that's what they did. They ran a ton of that stuff, and it didn't work at all, because even though the Democrats tried to come in with a negotiating point where they were going to just essentially create a phony decriminalization and make it like, instead of a $100 fine, it was going to be, 30 days suspended sentence. So therefore nothing. They were forced to compromise. So it's 6 months to a year that you can get.
They were forced to compromise by the facts on the ground. That's really what it was. There was no overcoming that with any sort of political messaging. You look at what's going on in neighborhoods all across Portland. Like I said before, I've seen current pictures of Southeast Division Street or Northeast 33rd or up by Airport Way. All the hot spots for the homelessness, and it's significantly worse than it was. And then you see all these drug addicts on the street just turning into complete zombies. It's human wreckage, and the voters and the leadership of the state of Oregon caused it. There's even Portland, which I've described before many times as the most adolescent city I've ever lived in, because nobody wants to make the hard decisions in Portland and do the right thing to clean up the city. And it's been like that for the entire time I lived there, 27 years. And it's gotten significantly worse. Even Portland decided we've had enough of the human wreckage on our city streets.
Yeah, they've been trying to clear it out, and then they kept running into Measure 110. So then, really, the county of Multnomah hasn't figured it out either, because they are still like stuck in George Floyd's 2020.
Yeah.
Which almost sounds like a sci-fi novel, doesn't it? George Floyd's 2020.
Well, I don't know what the situation is in Portland, but I recently read that the city of Pittsburgh has had to completely suspend patrol services throughout the city in the middle of the night because they just don't have the staffing for it. I suspect, I think New York's the same way, and I suspect Portland's in a similar situation. You call 911 because somebody's breaking into your house at 3 a.m. You're not getting a response.
Oh no, and yet we still have Measure 114 hanging out there, the one that basically repeals your Second Amendment rights. Or makes it subject to a permit, and it's unconstitutional. I'm just convinced that eventually it's going to just be thrown out. But we're going to have to go through fighting to get back our constitutional rights in court for years.
Yeah, I don't know about Measure 114, frankly. I think that you're not going to ever get to the point where the legislature will favor repealing that.
No, the legislature won't. But I mean, the Harney County judge has ruled it unconstitutional. But when it goes to the appeals court and then the Oregon Supreme Court, we think it'll probably.
That's my point, right? Is you're never going to be able. You can file the initial suit in a friendly county, but eventually it's going to work its way to some liberal circuit, and you're screwed.
So I do think that the key is that it gets to the U.S. Supreme Court, because it really does have implications for every state. And there are federal rulings about permits to purchase in other states that said no.
There's a lot of that stuff, right? So, it's already been ruled upon by the Supreme Court. If it has to go back to the Supreme Court, they're not going to take kindly to having to relitigate this again, right?
Yeah, but that's what the Democrats like to do. They like to make you relitigate clear decisions of the court.
As James O'Keefe has pointed out many times, the process is the punishment. That's why they raided him at 5 a.m. with the FBI no-knock raid, because they've done that to all the J6 prisoners, political prisoners, a whole bunch of political enemies. And that's the entire point, is to wear you down emotionally, financially, destroy your life in any way they can, and run out the clock.
Well, that's what they're doing to President Trump. And, if it weren't for the fact that the Secret Service probably would have shot somebody, they actually had to tell him that they were coming. But then they still treated the lawyers like they were, accomplices to the crime, instead of people there asking questions, which they should be allowed to ask. I mean,
well, not only that, but look at the 65 Project. This is another one of those dark money groups that Soros funds and a whole bunch of the other liberal billionaires fund, that are organizing bar complaints and lawsuits against any lawyer that has represented a J6 prisoner or represented a member of the Trump cabinet or administration. They're just attacking people with lawfare that we've never seen in this country before, and it's frightening what they're doing, and they're only going to go further.
Well, that's the thing. If they succeed at doing it to anybody, or even just inflicting pain through the process and costing them money, this is going to encourage them. The real thing means a complete repudiation. These guys actually have to be investigated and found to be abusing that same system, lying to judges,
But I mean, you look at what happened with the Michael Mann trial, where he sued Mark Stein of National Review for slander. And when he filed it in the DC District Court, that's when he won his case, right? I escaped from liberal blue Portland and moved to Florida to avoid this kind of stuff. But even in the swamps of North Florida where nobody can find me, the stuff that happens in Oregon still affects my life. The stuff that happens in DC still affects my life. The stuff that's happening to Trump with Letitia James is still affecting my life, because they're setting those precedents legally that will allow the government to be unleashed against private citizens.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm sure your net worth is not in the billions, but if they can do it to somebody who's been president of the United States with billions of dollars, they can do it to anybody. And
Right.
they can just invent stuff and have
Sure.
judges literally that ruling on with the victimless crime of a bank accepting the what some judge has decided is an exaggerated valuation for property.
That whole thing is so ridiculous, man. And everybody made money. Everybody testified on behalf of Donald Trump, and the judge decided he committed fraud anyway.
Yeah. And the guy knew that there's a Supreme Court ruling in Indiana, which will basically throw it out under 8th and 14th Amendment grounds. It's going to happen. But
sure,
they're getting away with, and creating the drama around it in the meantime. Now, you're right. And by the way, so that makes you a swamp creature, but a good swamp creature.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm all about that. I'd rather fight off alligators than bureaucrats.
Exactly.
In fact, maybe I could combine them somehow.
The ultimate justice would be feeding bureaucrats to alligators. That would actually then that's pay-per-view right there. So
there you go. Yep. And then I could become a billionaire, and yeah, there you go.
So there's a couple of recent articles you've written on restorationofamerica.com that I thought it'd be fun to cover. One of them is one of your regular features, which is the worst climate stories of the week. Trust scientism, smash capitalism. Tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, so I write this weekly column now where I find the worst climate change stories I can find, and it's really not hard to find them. So, but it's getting insane. I mean, they're just ratcheting it up over and over again. The couple of weeks ago, it was kind of a light week, and I kind of got lulled into a sense of false security that maybe things were getting back to normal again. But I mean, you look at this, I mentioned earlier, the Michael Mann trial, where he won $1 million judgment against Mark Stein, the conservative columnist and pundit, and they have been emboldened. And in fact, in the aftermath of that ruling, Michael Mann said flat out, I'm going to appeal having removed some of the plaintiffs or some of the defendants from this lawsuit, and I'm going to go after more of my opponents. So he got away with saying some really nasty things about skeptics, way worse things than anything Mark Stein ever said against him. So no, to answer my own question, the stories are just going to get worse and more insane, and they're going to get worse because of what's coming down. We've got the presidential election coming up this year, so the stories have been just nuts. I mean, they want to put curtains around glaciers at Antarctica to protect them from ocean currents that might be knocking glaciers off of the ice shelf, because they think it's being caused by global. They don't even think it. They're just making wild, unfounded claims that climate change is causing ocean currents to become stronger that are making these ice shelves break off. There's zero evidence to any of it. In fact, I did just to toot my own horn for Restoration of America, I did a very lengthy report on junk science. behind the climate change hysteria. If we go to, let me find it here. It's if you go to restorationofamerica.com and you search junk science, it will pop up. It's called How the Left's Global Warming Ideology Wrecked Science and How to Stop It. So I went into, I mean, it's 15 pages. It's nothing but, I mean, it's astonishing the amount of BS that they've spewed to back up this false claim, all the way to manipulating temperature data. A lot of people don't know this because the news doesn't report on it, but there are about 1,200 weather stations across the United States. This is just one example of the crap that they're spewing. But there are 1,200 weather stations that have recorded temperature data for about 100 years, about the turn of the 20th century, so 120 something years. 81% of those weather stations have shown a trend of cooling or no warming over 120 years. Only 19% of those weather stations have shown any warming at all. And those 19%, most of those are in cities that are affected by the urban heat island.
Heat island, yeah, right.
Yeah. So, but it goes even further than that, because NOAA, National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, those 1,200 weather stations, about 40% of them, either the equipment doesn't work anymore because it's over
100 years old. I think you froze there. Hope I didn't freeze. I never know when we might have lost. Oh, there you are.
Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Yep, there we are.
Yeah, no, you came back for a second. It's apparently an alligator was nibbling on a what's the fiber optic cable someplace.
That's entirely possible, yeah. But anyway, the 40% of the weather stations stopped recording data 30, 40, 50 years ago, either because the equipment was 100 years old and stopped working, or because the people that were hand counting all the temperatures and compiling all that data died, retired, or are no longer doing it. And so what NOAA is doing, instead of hiring somebody else to fill out that information every day, they're just estimating data. They're putting estimated temperatures in every day. And they've changed the time of day that they're collecting the data. I mean, it's so manipulated. And the United States, of course, has the most thorough network of weather stations of any nation in the world, because we're so much more advanced, and so there is no accurate. I'm comfortable stating that there's no accurate climate data that goes back 100 years that sufficiently has a sufficient amount of data that shows that there's any warming at all.
And isn't it true that so they started using satellites to start measuring atmospheric warming, and the satellites aren't showing?
Well, it depends on where they look, right? Because yes, the satellite data is a lot more reliable, a lot clearer, a lot better, and a lot just more robust data, right? And that's about 40 years of data that we have. Although I will say, you go back to 1979 when the first weather satellites went up. We've got a lot more than we did then. So the early days of the data aren't as reliable as today, of course.
Oh yeah.
But they also there is warming that's being shown by satellite data, but it depends on where you look. Now, they've been measuring ocean temperatures for 100 years as well, with weather buoys and ships trolling with towing weather equipment behind them, right?
Yeah,
they've been doing that for a long time, and there's zero. In fact, there's slight cooling in most of the ocean temperatures. So again, like I said, it depends on where you look and how you manipulate the data, whether or not you're going to find warming.
Yeah, and then they just ignore stuff like the South Pole's actually gaining ice, as they claim the North Pole's losing it. But then the North Pole, it gets bigger, and it's just like it's. I think that what they're doing is they're destroying something very important that we might actually need. We might need actual science one day instead of
Well,
this.
what they're destroying, like they did with COVID, the whole reason this program exists is they're destroying our trust in the experts. They're destroying
Yeah,
our trust in the institutions that used to faithfully gather this data and then send it to scientists for analysis. They're completely destroying any faith we have in our institutions. And if you're still out there believing experts right now, we need to have a long talk.
so trust the scientism. So there's the Olympic Games you mentioned here are going to get underway in Paris in July, and it's of course the middle of the summer in the northern hemisphere. But it says here the host city announced their intention to make it the greenest games ever. What's going to the consequence going to be for that?
Well, so the mayor of Paris is a greenie nut, and she announced that all of the lodging for all the athletes is being built without air conditioning being installed, and so there's been a popular revolt by the various different national teams. You know, the Brazilians and the Australians are pissed, and they're bringing their own air conditioners.
Nice.
But you know, she actually came out and said you have to trust the scientists, and the scientists have told us that we can't have air conditioning, but they're building these buildings to be more efficient, and so we can make them habitable without air conditioning, and blah 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 blah.
So she's the mayor. I wonder if the place where she lives in Paris is entirely without air conditioning. I mean,
How
I always
about
ask
City
that,
Hall?
or City Hall for that matter. That's right.
Yeah.
And Paris can be humid and warm during the summer. So
Yeah, that's why they call them the summer games, right? It happens during the summer.
yeah, which is the summer I heard is entirely caused by global warming. It doesn't. It didn't happen before until there was global warming, and then
Yeah,
all extreme weather happened after that.
that's right. That's right.
So CCP invades a small town court. How'd they do that?
So there's the Chinese Communist Party owns so little bit of background information. Every corporation incorporated in the in China is required either to be owned by the state or to have a political division inside the corporation that ensures that the company is doing the bidding of the Chinese Communist Party.
Like ByteDance. Yeah.
Like what?
Like ByteDance.
I'm not familiar. Is
So
that TikTok?
Yeah, it owns TikTok. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No, same exact thing. And so they were going to build an EV battery factory in a tiny little town in Michigan. 3,000 people in this town. This got national coverage actually because when the citizens found out, they were doing all this stuff in secret and setting up all these contracts with the city and not publicizing these contracts. And when the citizens found out, they actually recalled the entire city council and replaced them with people that were not going to allow this to happen because they're spending. I mean, you know, Gretchen Whitmer, the Democratic governor, was dedicating $1 billion in taxpayer funds to this thing, and the city was building infrastructure at their own expense. You know, so there was a lot of taxpayer money. Federal grants were going into this. It was taxpayer money up and down to allow this quote unquote private Chinese company to come in and build a EV factory, EV battery factory, I should say, without any concern towards the environmental impacts of the manufacture of batteries. So they recalled the city council, replaced them all. The new city council canceled this contract, and now the Chinese Communist Party, or the company run by the Chinese Communist Party, is suing this town in federal court for breach of contract. So the voters having a say in this is actually breach of contract. So good luck with that, pal.
Yeah, no kidding. And I see there's an Oregon story here. What if dams are the natural state of the river? And as you know, we're trying to get rid of dams here because water and gravity are not renewable resources. And so we shouldn't use them to generate electricity. But now they are trying to save fish that have already been saved. by taking out dams so that the electricity rates can go up.
Yeah. Have you watched what's going on with the Klamath River dams?
I don't know some of the details on the irrigation side, and I see that's one of the things you mentioned here.
Yeah, I've been covering this for a couple of weeks. They breached one of the lower dams in Northern California, and it's one of the dams, one of the hydroelectric dams owned by PGE. And through this entire process, the dam got breached, and all of that toxic goo that is built up for decades behind this dam.
Oh yeah.
Because it's all you can grow in the Klamath Lake, as shallow as it is blue-green algae. It's horrendous,
Yeah.
So all this crap builds up, all these toxins build up over decades, and they breach this dam, and it sends this wall of mud down the river, and it turned the river into this mud bank where wildlife, deer got stuck in it and died, and wildlife died, and then they had done a release of hatchery salmon from a hatchery upriver, and they all got caught with the extra pressure of the extra water and mud. They all got caught in this outlet tube underneath one of the other dams, and almost 1 million fish died. So and they've created this giant stinking mud pit. It looks like something off of the surface of Venus. And that's just one dam. They got 3 more hydroelectric dams to go, and then they're going to breach the irrigation dams upriver. It's an ecological disaster, and this is the lie that they have based the entire thing on. It has nothing to do with, well, they say it has everything to do with salmon populations and restoring the natural run of the river, but there's evidence that Indians, Native Americans, dammed the river for thousands of years before the white man even showed up in the Klamath River Basin to trap fish, to go fishing. They built fishing platforms to spear salmon with, like they did on the Columbia. So they've been doing this for thousands of years. So there is no natural run of the Klamath River that federal agencies can actually point to that they're trying to restore. So all of this is based on lies, and it's all based on the ulterior motive, which is to reverse human progress, reverse hydroelectric, cheap hydroelectric power. They also have never proven, by the way, that the salmon aren't declining because of overfishing in the ocean. They've never studied that.
Yeah.
So they just
why would they want to do that?
Yeah. No, I mean they live most of their lives in the ocean. They only go upriver to spawn. So the idea that they're declining only because of the dams doesn't even pass the smell test.
Well, all those fish had to be destroyed in order to save them. It reminds me of when they used to joke about how in the Vietnam War that town had to be destroyed in order to save it. It's like
I mean, it's sickening what they're doing, and they're destroying livelihoods. They're destroying homesteads that have been held for 3, 4, 5 generations that were handed out to soldiers returning from World War II and even World War I. It goes back that far. That's 4 or 5 generations back that these people have been ranching on homesteads that they plotted out themselves.
And let's face it, this is totally predictable, and they just didn't give a crap.
Yeah.
So Biden's war on cars escalates, and the media covers it up. This is the last part of that story, and I've been following what they've been going to war with cars. I don't see a lot of Democrats getting rid of their cars yet, but they are going to war with cars. And I can't imagine why Detroit is still, like, what is it? The UAW, the leadership still were endorsing Joe Biden. And I'm like, this guy's destroying the reason to have an industry.
Well, the reason the UAW heads, the leaders, are endorsing Biden is because he's promised them all sorts of federal tax money to build EV plants. The rank and file members are all voting for Trump. I would be surprised if they weren't voting for Trump by 80% to 20 for Biden.
Well, but nobody's buying the EVs. They got lots full of EVs that are just sitting there. And I know that the auto dealers here in Oregon are pissed because they're like, just stop forcing us to take these things because nobody wants them. They can't charge them.
One of my previous columns, I covered the story of Buick dealerships that were being forced by GM that owns them to carry like 50% of their lot had to be electric vehicles. And fully 50% of the dealers nationwide announced that they were just going to retire, go out of business, close up shop instead of complying with that mandate from corporate. So the dealers know it's bull crap. The consumers know it's crap. Everybody knows it's crap. Nobody's buying these things. The early adopters have already been exhausted, right? And these vehicles don't perform to the standards of your next wave of potential customers, which are soccer moms and suburban voters and people that live in their cars, right? The young kids they got to take to soccer practice or to school or go to the shopping center or whatever. I mean, living a normal life is not even possible in an electric vehicle.
Yeah, and I think not only is it the electric vehicle itself, which has a number of issues to it. It has more weight. The tires wear out faster. After 6 or 8 years, the batteries have to be replaced, and they cost an enormous sum of money to replace. I think a Tesla can be like $15,000 or $20,000 to replace the batteries.
Yep.
And so as used cars go, they're going to be worthless because no one's going to want one.
Well, that's right. Yeah.
It's like buying a 6-year-old smartphone. It's just not going to work out. It's like it's going to be dead in a week. You're like, okay, how much is that worth? $5. But I think.
Well, the old saw is that when you buy a new car, you lose whatever 20%, 50% of the value as soon as you drive it off the lot, right? I mean, the obsolescence is built in. But with electric vehicles, they've shown that it's even more than that. It's a 20% higher rate of what's the word I'm looking for? Deterioration of the value.
Depreciation.
Depreciation. Thank you.
Yep.
It's a 20% higher rate of depreciation for EVs than regular cars. Never mind the fact that a recent study came out showing that if you were to fill up a gas car and translate all of the fees and costs to fully charging an electric vehicle, it's the equivalent of $17.33 per gallon. So it's like 3 times as expensive to fill up an electric vehicle as it is to fill the tank of an internal combustion engine car.
Well, and we're seeing double-digit increases in the cost of electricity, especially as they knock down these dams.
Oh, yeah. So that's even before that, though. That's just the taxes and fees and the infrastructure and the built-in costs. That's even before the increased cost of electricity.
And that's if you can find a functioning charging station. If you are not driving a Tesla, you cannot find, I think it's like 50% of the time the things don't work at all. And they take longer than they say.
It's more than that. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal a few months back that I think it was 25% of them work. And they're always out. But there was, I think, forgive my faulty memory, but I think the grant was something like $7.5 billion that the Biden administration put out to build the infrastructure, to build the charging stations across the nation. And they built like 2. So,
well, and then they formed a task force on the future of electric vehicles to advance them and promote them. And Biden invited everybody but Elon Musk to it. And Elon Musk, I remember he did this Twitter post and he goes, last month we sold like 250,000 Teslas. And the rest of the industry combined sold, and it was like in the double digits. It was just some absurdly low number of EVs being sold by Ford and GM and all the rest of them. So nobody wanted these other vehicles, and they can't charge them.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right. And you've got all these other problems, right? I mean, all these different cars have different charging platforms, and they're going to try to switch them overall to one universal charging platform, but that's going to take time. And you get the defenders, you get the early adopters and the evangelists who say, it cost me $10 to fill up my car overnight in my garage. Well, yeah, that's good for you, but how much did it cost you to install that charger in your garage, and what kind of risk are you taking having that EV in your garage that you might burn your house down? Because that's happened quite a bit here in Florida. Obviously we got a lot of hurricanes. During Hurricane Ian, there were a bunch, just dozens of EVs that caught fire because they were flooded.
Submerged,
and the water caused the batteries to catch fire and explode. And the fire departments all over the state were like, we don't have the equipment to put this crap out. What are we going to do?
Oh my God. Well,
it's ridiculous.
People are going to look back on this era and think that they're going to show this alongside those pictures of people trying to figure out how to build an airplane where the guy is pedaling a bicycle and it has one of these things twirling and then he goes off the cliff and crashes. That's going to look back at all these things that we did and think those people thought they were intelligent species.
And they spent how much on that?
Well, just one last story you wrote about that we could just pay a little lip service here too, because it's is the Joe Biden's collapsing border. You did a week by week analysis here, and you brought out some pretty interesting perspectives on this, because especially with Venezuela in the spotlight, and of course, you highlighted this visit by Rachel Campos Duffy, which I actually listened to on the radio as she went to one of these super secret locations where they had thugs that forced them to leave, and then some guy came out and started throwing bricks at them, and they had a congressman with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, no, there was a congressman there that was under attack, but I've been working with a couple of whistleblowers. So I've got a couple of future stories coming out that will be very interesting. One of them is a guy who volunteered. He's an ex-cop from Chicago, and he volunteered with one of the NGOs in Dallas and helped them. He provided security. He provided service on the bus to take them from Dallas to Chicago, where their final destination was. And he's been digging into all these public buildings that Chicago is throwing open to all the illegal immigrants. He helped illegals get to the Dallas airport and bypass TSA work with them with their paperwork to get them through. So he's blowing the whistle on all that stuff, right? I mean, it's crazy. And then I got another one who's a former member of the Trump administration who works for for Homeland Security. He's in charge of communicable diseases in their weapons of mass destruction division, and he's been placed on unpaid leave for 4 years because he started blowing the whistle on the Biden administration not vetting immigrants at the border for infectious diseases, and especially, of course, after Title 42 ended. So, right. I mean, he's mad, and he's talking. And
roulette. We're playing roulette with this.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're talking about. I mean, there was a I forget where this was now, but there was a breakout among children of syphilis, which is just disturbing on every level. Yeah. He's saying that up to 25% of the people coming across the border have COVID, so there's all kinds of this stuff, and never mind the human trafficking, all that stuff, the Sound of Freedom, all that stuff. I mean, it's a nightmare. It's hell on earth, and we're not, the press is not covering it. In that column you mentioned, I talked about MSNBC making fun of this as an issue that decided some of the primary elections. I mean, it's these people look down their nose with disgust at everybody who thinks this is a bad situation.
It is, and the fact is, we're paying for a lot of it with taxpayer money, which is more infuriating.
That's the other thing I'm digging into is all that money going into NGOs, the taxpayer money going into dark money groups, unfortunately, including religious groups like the Methodist Church, Catholic Charities. A lot of these church groups are either being used or allowing themselves to be used to break American law, and it's sickening to watch.
Well, exposing it, telling the truth is actually the first step, and I hope that's something we get to continue doing, and I appreciate that you're doing it. By the way, you've written as well in the past for PGA Media, and a colleague of yours there, Robert Spencer. I just happened to catch this article. It says, "Are you ready for a major jihad attack in the U.S.? Because it's coming." That's like a no-brainer, isn't it?
It is. The number of people on the terror watch list that they're aware of that have crossed the border has skyrocketed. Never mind the ones that got away or that they're not aware of at all. Right.
Yeah.
So, and of course, the internet exploded today when that bridge collapsed in Baltimore. Was it a terror attack? It appears that it wasn't, but you never know. You got to give the investigative process time. But we go back to a year or two ago when there were lots of random attacks on electrical substations up in Washington, down here in Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, all over the place. There's several different stations were attacked. And then you go back a year before that when there were so many fires at food processing plants. I covered all these stories, right? And my working theory on that is that it was some sort of group of people that were probing our weaknesses and to see where the vulnerabilities were, but there's no reason to believe that stuff won't increase with all of these people pouring over the border. We don't know who these people are, but we do know, by the way, our mutual friend Michael Yan has been down at the Darien Gap quite a bit, and he's sounding the alarm on how much more activity he's seeing from the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese coming building infrastructure, Central America, all the way to Wall Street.
No, you're there, but it's sort of breaking up a little bit. But it's just the CCP jamming you because they don't want anyone to know what you're just saying.
That's right.
They're flooding the United States with military-age males. And by the way, how many Chinese people just get to waltz out of China without the government saying that they can do that? That just doesn't really happen, does it?
No, that's a really good point. There's a reason they're ending up in South America and then making the trek up north, and it's not because they escaped and floated over here. That's 6,000 miles away.
That's right.
Unlike, by the way, the Haitians who are going to come here and eat me if I don't protect myself.
Well, you've got some alligators to help keep security going, but I know that I really appreciate you. You came on in relatively short notice. That since David's been out and he's recovering and so on, and we're praying and thinking about him.
I'm definitely continuing to pray for him.
Yeah, we're I really appreciate you taking the time to come on. This is great. I miss you. I just got to tell you, and I know you don't miss.
I miss you guys too. This was always a lot of fun to do on a nightly basis, but it's tough for me to get back. I got this new position with restoration, so I'm that's taking a lot of my time. So,
well,
I love coming on whenever I can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I appreciate you kind of keeping us up to date on what you're writing about, because you've always you were calling out Soros and the network of organizations a long time ago. before it was fashionable. Let's
I
put it
wrote a
that
book about it. I don't know if I told you this.
That's right. Behind the curtain. No, I know, and I actually included in the the Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube blurb, so that
Awesome.
people can find out about it, because it really is. You were the pioneer in calling this out, and guess what? It's everywhere. It is everywhere. It's behind every single judicial race, every DA race. I happen to know about a circumstance that's going on in Wasco and Gillum counties that are it's literally, they are trying to sneak under the radar using money and resources and organization to muscle in on what are conservative counties. And this is happening.
That's certainly happening in Klamath and Lake counties with the dam removal projects. Those are all environmental groups being backed by the worst of the leftist billionaires.
Well, now they got this thing, which I'm sure you'll come to blows with this issue soon too, which is the offshore wind farms that they're trying to stick on the coast of Oregon. And when you trace it back, all this and then the forest management, you trace back what groups are behind it. They're not in Oregon, or they're financed usually by something Soros related. It's just crazy.
Yeah. No, it's I saw something recently about the offshore wind projects going on in Oregon, and I'm so old I can remember when Scott Bruin ran for CD5 back in 2010, and they ran ads against him that he wanted to put oil derricks out there off the Oregon coast. Now I'm like, what's the difference?
Actually, the oil derricks have a longer history of being safe.
Of course,
because these things, they're tethered in 1,000 feet of water where they've never done this before. And they are killing whales by the dozens, by the way, because they get disoriented and confused by the electrical hum that they're not used to. They can't get accustomed to it, and it messes them up and it kills them. Yeah. Yeah, and they are also...
I'm so old I can remember when they wanted to save the whales.
Yeah, I know now. And then we used to joke, nuke the whales, right? Just as a response. But actually, the Democrats finally came full circle, and they're going to windmill the whales. And they've also got with forests. Here's the latest. So put this on your radar. I'll bet you'll write a story about it in the not too distant future. Climate forests. Apparently, the reason why you can't touch any forest, and you have to take an old growth pledge, which means a tree that's 80 years old cannot be cut down. 80 is that they are carbon sinks, and therefore, if you even touch a single tree, you are destroying the planet because you're causing global warming. So, see, that's going to be on your list. It's climate forests.
You know what's funny about that, though, is that Bill Gates at COP28 or 29, whichever one it was in Dubai just in November, he was asked about planting trees and sequestering carbon, and he said, "That's ridiculous. I'm not ever going to get myself involved in something so silly." And he's invested in this company that is taking trees, cutting them down, and burying them in the Nevada desert to sequester carbon that way. You can't make sense of any of this crap.
No, it is beyond common sense. And I would be satisfied. It doesn't have to be conservative right-wing policies alone. I mean, I'd love to see them, but if they could just introduce enough common sense that we aren't talking about nutty stuff like this, that would be a huge step in the right direction.
Well, I'll end on this. I've stopped calling it common sense. I refer to it as basic sense, but it is not common in any way.
No, that's the problem. It's become less common. Therefore, maybe it's no longer a proper term, but basic sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I believe that there are people out there who can understand common sense or basic sense if it's presented to them. That's the problem, isn't it? We have to present it to them.
It just gets drowned out. They flood the zone with all their crap, and you can't break through.
So it's restorationofamerica.com is where folks can go find. We posted several of these stories on the Facebook feed here, and they can also follow you on Twitter at Charger Jeff, right?
Yes. Yep.
And Facebook, I believe you're, let's see.
It's Jeff Reynolds Author.
Jeff Reynolds
is my
Author
page
on Facebook. I'll post that here too. But thank you, Jeff, for joining us and sharing your sense of humor too, because I think that's the only way if we don't laugh at this, it's just life's too hard. Yeah.
Yep. I'm just sitting here watching the collapse.
Well, you're watching it from Florida from a safe distance.
With a nice sunset and some lapping waves.
Well, take care of yourself, Jeff, and we look forward to having you on again in the not too distant future, especially with some of these great articles that you got coming up.
All right. You take care of yourself too, Kevin, and thanks again for having me on.
You bet. And thanks everyone for watching, and share this show with everyone you can. We'll be back tomorrow night. It'll be Don and I on the next episode of The Captive Audience.